Okay, everybody, thank you for coming back to the Xanadu Review. My name is Prester John Andrews, but as always, you can just call me PJ. So today I have an interesting pair of guests. I have Chris and Steph from the Chinese Cooking Demystified channel, who are also here on Substack. So, as you can imagine, they run a YouTube channel where they go over traditional Chinese cooking, and they do a lot of really interesting stuff there. So if you guys want to go ahead, introduce yourself maybe and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your channel, maybe what you do on Substack a little bit as well.
Yeah, so I guess we've been doing Chinese recipes for almost a decade now. So, we had been doing kind of long recipes on Reddit, and then we kind of slowly started getting into videos and also started posting on Substack about a couple of years ago, kind of getting back into the sort of long form, food sort of content. So, basically what we do is, I think a lot of people, especially in the West, have Chinese or Asian supermarkets close to them. Especially if you're into food, you might go into them every once in a while to get meat or fish or this kind of thing. And so basically we have the idea that we want to teach people kind of authentic, culturally grounded recipes that people are able to execute as long as they have an Asian supermarket near them. So that's kind of what we do. And we also try to give the cultural context, a little bit of the historical context of these dishes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's part of what I really appreciate. And I think actually I was following you guys back on, it felt like, it must have been like around a decade ago. I don't think I was at the very beginning, but kind of when I first started following you two. And you're one of those, because I think, and I do want to get into this a little bit if you guys want to talk about it. They like the YouTube food world, because right now I work in the tech world and blogging is just a hobby. But before that, I was a professional chef. And I would always, come back to a couple of different YouTube channels pretty consistently for inspiration. Like I would say, you guys are definitely one of them. Anytime I want to do Chinese food, even if it's just learning the techniques. Somebody like Chef John of Food Wishes is another OG who are just like pretty consistent. There's a lot of rise and fall of the flavor of the month, no pun intended, but you guys have been really consistently good like that. But I really appreciate that you also have the historical and cultural context, because that's my other thing. I love history and culture, and like ever since I was a little kid, I've been enamored with Chinese culture and the art. Like I see you guys have like a very beautiful painting behind you, like looks like traditional Chinese art. And it sounds silly, but when I was a little kid, I remember we'd go to like Chinese restaurants, and in the US you have those like very corny Chinese art imitation murals. But even back then it was just like such an enamoring style to me. So that was I think you guys do a really good job with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks, and I'm glad you like it. I guess for us, this is also our passion as well, just being interested in culture and history, because I feel like we do take a lot of things like just for granted, and you just think it's there, and it's just there because it is. But then if you look into the thing, that's all the everyday stuff that we are consuming and using, there's always some kind of interesting story behind it. Like just right before this our chat, we were just looking at the painting behind us, because it's a painting from the Ming Dynasty. Yes. And then it depicts one of the biggest cities of the time. It's like city life. And then
beautiful.
you can see there's like a lot of rivers and boats. It's because it's like one of the biggest rice trading hubs within China back then. And I was just reading a book of that, talking about the rice cultivation of that time. So we're just like looking at that and just thinking about, what it what it's like, what
Yeah, like
rice.
yeah, sure. That the rice traders were, you can see some details where it's like a rice trader is right next to a boat manufacturer, which is right next to a guest house, and just little details like that. I always love this kind of scene. I'm sure maybe we can get a link for people there for this. It's
Yeah,
from
that'd
a
be great.
scroll
I'll put it
that
in
we
the
just
show
kind of
notes.
blew up. That yeah, the whole thing is just this massive scroll of city life that if we actually had the entire thing, it could go around a track, so it's just one section of it that we
Yeah,
kind
I
of
can
blew up.
imagine.
Yeah.
No, that's part of, oh, cute little dog there. Again, part of what really attracted me to your channel is because I think a lot of you can get a lot of just the cooking stuff that you providing the extra context there is probably what kept me coming back, since I'm somebody who just like I can go down different rabbit holes, and Chinese history is one of those things that I want to read more about. I'm just kind of very like what's the word I'm looking for? Eclectic with how I read about history. So I'll grab like a random history book or a random, a good, I forget who does it's just like the History of China podcast, but I feel like it's sometimes difficult in the United States to know what's good, what's not, what has good sources, especially when it's so far across the world and different languages, what's a good translation and stuff like that. And I think
Yeah,
your
makes
channel,
sense. Yeah.
I think it's in a way it's a good entry point when you because I don't know, there was a quote by Anthony Bourdain about how like if you want to learn about another culture, you do it through their food, because even if like you have cultures that are like different or even have a certain amount of animosity towards each other, you can like have a get somebody talking about their food and they'll open right up.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that just generally speaking, food when it comes to any different culture, it's definitely the most accessible entry point, right? Like food and to a lesser extent music, right? Where even now, like I can't appreciate Chinese poetry, right? Like my Chinese just isn't that good, right? But you can go downstairs and you can have a baozi and it can be delicious. And then you're like, okay, I want to make that thing. And then you need to dive in and learn how to make it. And then you're also kind of connected because it's, you're going through the same process that, grandmothers and mothers have gone through for centuries or decades, right? Depending on the dish. So yeah, I think it's definitely, it's like an accessible entry point, and then also something that can be good for this kind of food history or the cultural context. I'd say is that as people that are not academics, it's very easy for us to kind of, I don't know, tell people the cultural context behind a dish and say, this is the story of how it's made. Is it true? I don't know, but this is what people say, right? And it does maybe tell you something about the essence of the dish, blah, 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 So there's definitely, I think, when you're introducing people to food in that way, yeah, it's a way that we can kind of be amateur geeks about that kind of like historical thing without having necessarily the same rigor that you would need to as like an academic.
Yeah, I think that's part of the fun of it too, since I know there's another YouTube channel two actually that I really enjoy that are kind of in that vein. I don't know if you've seen either what is it, Tasting History with Max Miller.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
he does great stuff like that. That's another one of my dream guests. And Jason Townsend of Jason Townsend and Son. Those are both because those are both in a genre of like, wow, these are such interesting recipes and such interesting stories, but I would almost never make the food just because it doesn't, because it's something from like hundreds of years ago. It's maybe not the best tasting sounding thing in the world, but I think you guys like it's always stuff that I want to try a lot of the times, and it's certain things have like become a part of my regular rotation, or at the very least, I feel like technique wise, you guys do a really good job teaching like the traditional Chinese technique.
There's something specifically, I don't think we've really ever done a historical recipe on. I guess we've done one or two. A couple, right?
Actually kind of following the actual historical recipe and kind of recreate it. But the problem with historical recipe is that if you look at them, they are usually just a couple sentences and they're not really a recipe. It's kind of more like people's notes. So you need to just use that and base that to kind of add your own understanding. But then also the problem is that our own understanding is very modern. We learn cooking in the modern kitchen with all this modern food supply. So it's really hard to kind of actually know what is actually going on.
Yeah, it's like what I often think about with historical recipes is lots of times, we have in general, I think it's fair to say that the cooking ability in the society before used to generally be much higher. But in terms of kind of like a modern society, people don't necessarily have all the same time that they had. And so now recipes are sort of almost like technical documents that people are trying to follow step by step, because ultimately they don't necessarily know fundamentally how to cook. But historical recipes, lots of times they really feel more like chef's notes. So like, for example, if cook professionally, if I told you that my mac and cheese is a bechamel mac and cheese and I toss in a little bit of cheddar, parm, and hot sauce, something like that, right? You would be able to immediately know, okay, I know how this dude is making this, right? But then if you don't have necessarily all of the same context, then there would be a lot that's missing. Like, okay, what is the bechamel? What kind of hot sauce are you using, et cetera, right? What kind of breadcrumbs, whatever it is. And so the challenge with historical recipes is that they take a lot of interpretation. And lots of times, like, it's a lifelong process where we kind of look back on certain historical recipes and we're like, oh, yeah, we should have probably used this kind of Shaoxing wine for this thing instead of that one, or compensated another way. Because, yeah, it takes a lot of very detailed kind of domain specific knowledge to be able to kind of recreate it and actually have it be tasty, because lots of times a historical recipe, if you just kind of blindly follow it, it's just not going to taste good, because there's all these little kind of little things, these little steps that are just not enumerated. So yeah. But historical recipes, yes, very interesting. And
it's I guess that touches on something else that I wanted to bring up with you guys, since it's like the conversation of like authenticity versus like making it your own, and I guess just like versatility for home cooks. Because like one funny example it made me think of, I remember, I think as you guys had this video, as like Henry Kissinger, like some like U.S. diplomat had like I forget, it was like his own
Kissinger's Mugu Gai Pan,
that, and it was like insanely off or something like that. Just like as far, although I think if I remember, you said it wasn't like bad tasting, it just wasn't even really close to accurate. Am I remembering that correctly? I tried to find the video.
Yeah. So with that one, it was well, I guess backing up slightly about Henry Kissinger's Mogu Gai Pan for everybody, is that this is kind of like a Chinese takeout classic in the West, right? But this specific dish of kind of mushroom and sliced chicken sheets, I don't want to say that it doesn't exist in Guangdong. It's one of those things that could exist, but it's not like something that you would see. Like, I've never seen it on a menu, right?
It's something that you may just make at home, or maybe it's
Mhm.
one of those dishes that people used to make it more and then it kind of like fade out of fashion. But it
Mhm.
definitely within that kind of like stir fry a meat with a vegetable component category of things.
Yeah. So the dish itself is kind of this interesting dish because something especially early on in the channel, something that we often like to do, but we kind of ended up running out pretty fast, was kind of doing the sort of Guangdong versions or mainland Chinese versions of things on the takeout menu. For example, you know, uh,
There's egg fouillon.
yeah, egg fouillon, or I'm having a brain fart. The dish with the pancakes that is from Beijing. That's like the
What you
eh,
mean 两面黄?
no. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine.
Mushu pork is
Yes,
like the Americanized
mushu
version.
pork. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, mushu roe. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
just on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, sorry about that. Right. Yeah, so like mushu pork, right, is an interesting example because it's served in a certain way in American takeout joints, but it's also its own dish in the north of China, but it's rather different, and it's usually not explicitly served with chunbing spring pancakes. But it could, because spring pancake eating is its own thing up there. So it's a fun sort of thing to kind of navigate. You have this thing that people have a basis for, and then you can use that to sort of spread out, right? So we often like covering those kinds of dishes. But then there would be certain things like mugugai pan, or egg rolls. That's another one. Egg rolls as compared to spring rolls. That just, it just kind of research wise just kind of hit dead ends. Like couldn't really find anything over here. So I've been wanting to cover it for a while, but then how do we have an angle for it? And then it was going around Blue Sky or Twitter or something. Somebody dug up an old recipe that from some celebrity cookbook. I think it was Frank Sinatra's celebrity cookbook. So apparently they were friends. And Henry Kissinger had a mugugai pan recipe in there, and so we were like, yeah, we have to try it, right?
Mhm.
And when it comes to how he did it, um, it was I played it up a little bit for the video because you probably don't want to say too many nice things about Henry Kissinger, but uh, it was less bad than some other stir fry recipes that I've seen online, I would say, right? Less screwed up than you would see in certain, I don't know, New York Times recipes, right? So I
Mhm.
guess credit where credit's due. He at least knew somebody that knew a recipe that gave it
Yeah.
to the book, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's possible he really fell in love with it because that was like those famous pictures of like Nixon and Kissinger and China, which are like these huge things back in the day. So, but no,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's one of the things. It's like uh Kissinger kind of being a little bit of a panda hugger, I think, is the more charming aspect of Henry Kissinger. But yeah, obviously, that doesn't
yeah,
make up for
not a lot
laughs,
of them,
right?
not a lot
Like,
of not a lot of charming
yeah, not a
aspects
lot
in
of
that guy.
that, right?
Um,
But
but I think it raises an interesting question about, again, I mean, obviously, like that. For all we know, that wasn't even his recipe. That, I guess, that's neither here nor
yeah,
there. Like authenticity versus
right.
adaptability. Because I mean, there's
Hmm.
for like your channel and a number of other ones. Like since I have access to, I live in a place there's an Asian grocery store, so I can get pretty much everything. Like I live in a major metropolitan area. It's the
Hmm.
2020s. It's not that hard to get. But I think, gun to my head, if I had to pick a last meal, it might actually be like American Chinese food, like General Tao's chicken, pork fried rice, and egg rolls, and like some wonton soup. And I know that's the super
Yeah.
Americanized version, but that's just one of my comfort foods. And I think it's interesting the way that Chinese food, like really any food, just adapts to culture and history. Because there's somebody else I had on my podcast. Shout out to Pratik Dasgupta, who's a historian who writes partially about like prehistory, but also a lot of food history. And he talked about like the Indo-Chinese food. And that was a fascinating conversation about how like Chinese food would adapt to the Indian palate and vice versa, or how it adapts to the American palate. And I find that to be just such an interesting cultural, cultural conversation that exists. Because I feel like I have something similar in the U.S. Because my family, it's like of Cajun descent, and like Cajun food is another thing people feel really strongly about. Like my dad will get mad at me if I change the gumbo recipe, but like I'm so on, if that makes sense.
Okay, so here's a question for you, Steph, right? You have to choose between one of these two meals. A random Chinese recipe that was produced by a random person on YouTube or TikTok, okay? Or an American Chinese takeout meal.
Okay. Well, we've been to a lot of American takeout spots in the US. A lot. Some, not a lot, but some.
Go there to get some footage. Yeah.
We also go there to eat and try stuff. Honestly, as a Chinese, especially a Cantonese, things doesn't feel that far off. Like, so to answer your questions, of course, American Chinese takeout, because it's the adaptation, I'll say, is probably a little sweeter and then a little bit thicker on the sauce, probably to adapt to the Western palate on preference on like a thicker sauce kind of thing. But then generally speaking, like when we're in the US, when I really want vegetables, we'll go there.
Okay.
Yeah, when I feel that like I don't know, it's like sometimes there will be like some about a week or so I'll start to feel the lack of vegetable. And if we are not like cooking too much ourselves, then yeah, Chinese takeout will be the place. And it's always really comforting. So I think they're actually doing a pretty decent job.
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, sometimes when people kind of like talk about authenticity in food, I often think it's kind of like a moving target, and sometimes I'll use the word, but I think we can be honest that the word authentic itself is kind of one of those words that if you really drill down into it, doesn't have a ton of meaning, like authentic to what, authentic to where, authentic to what time. I often kind of see it with the inverse, right? That authenticity isn't a thing, it's the lack of inauthenticity, right? That lots of times, and when I think of something that's often inauthentic, it's things that are bullshit. It's things that are just kind of there to make money that nobody really cares about, that it's just kind of stuff slapped on the wall in order to I don't know, in order to make money or
make content,
yeah
whatever
things done with a lack of care, right? And so often I feel like when you have a certain kind of like gap in culture, then it can be very easy to bullshit, because you don't know, like after watching us for a bit, maybe eventually you do some recipes and you can kind of double check our work. But just watching a video, a lot of people, if they're not familiar with Chinese food, they don't know if we're bullshitting, right? And so it's very easy for people that don't actually know anything about the food to just kind of present things in a certain way that
scallions on top and call it Asian or Chinese.
And
right. Sesame.
Yeah, right.
That.
Yeah, all the classics.
Yeah, the whatever, some soy glaze or whatever kind of thing. And so to me, that kind of feels like a very kind of tangible thing that I can point to, and I can be like, okay, this is bullshit. And then you can say the word inauthentic. It's a little bit more polite, I guess. And then ultimately authenticity is the shortage of that, right? Like, the more care you're taking, the more kind of grounded something is in a specific culture, in a specific tradition. But yeah, lots of times it's a moving target, right? Like, so yeah, takeout American Chinese is an interesting aspect too, because it's something where you talk to some kind of Chinese Americans in the US, and some people will be like, yeah, this is kind of like our food. And then you talk to other people and they're like, oh no, that stuff's bullshit. That's what we feed white people, right? And so you within one group, you can get these wildly different opinions about that. And so yeah, it's an interesting corner of Chinese food for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think you see that with like basically any diaspora in the US. You have like, oh, this is the authentic from the mother country, and this is the Americanized version of it. And for some people, that's a point of pride. They're like, oh yeah, of course, it's the evolution of the cuisine and like the marrying of different identities. And some people seem, even like that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. Like my dad's side of the family is from Louisiana. Like Cajun food is like, some people take it very, very seriously. Like it is X, Y, and Z. And if you put A, B, or C in there, it's no longer gumbo. Like that's my dad's side of the family. I didn't grow up there. So like I'll put tomatoes in gumbo because I like it sometimes, or I have it. And that's kind of my philosophy, since for a long time I was very much like I liked the challenge of cooking, and your channel is something that I would use a lot. But now like I'm older and I've taken a lot of the techniques and I guess the mindset, you could say, but a lot of the times like be it even like Chinese traditional cooking, French, what have you, like I don't really have the patience for that on a Tuesday night. And I'll just use it as a technique. Like pretty much like one of my go-to like make for work and then bulk meals is just like fried rice with whatever meat or vegetables that I have on hand. Far from authentic, it's pretty good. But the technique that I learned is kind of what carried through.
I mean, I kind of feel like whatever fruit or whatever meat and vegetable you have on hand plus fried rice, that is the essence of fried rice,
Yeah, that is authentic. That's how people here, if they need to fry up some rice at home, that's how they think.
I almost feel like that's a little bit truer to the essence of fried rice than sometimes I feel like people online, they'll get like almost like mystical, like you need the certain kind of wok hei for your fried rice. And it's just like, I don't know, man. It's really one of those things that, lots of times the cultural context is you have leftover rice. What are you going to do with it? You can fry up a rice,
Yeah. Well, I think with anything like that, I feel like it's again a part of the evolution of identity in that sense that like I'm sure like some second or third generation Chinese Americans feel like, no, I have to go back to the super authentic version. I can't assimilate, much in the same way that like that's my dad, when it comes to Cajun food, like that's my dad's side of the family. And then I worked with a guy from Louisiana. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm making some gumbo. I'll make the roux from scratch. It's like, dude, nobody in Louisiana makes roux from scratch. We just buy it. So, I think there's a little bit of that little layer of separation there that like maybe sometimes the farther away you get.
Yeah, I think sometimes I feel like authenticity, like for people, what it means to certain kind, like you said, like second or third generation, the search for authenticity, it's their own search for their own identity. I think that can be the process that they themselves can go through. Like you can go back maybe a couple more generations, go back in time or place to trying to search the things that's more quote unquote authentic to them, and they can use that to I don't know, reinforce their tradition or their identity, but I don't think it should be used as a weapon against others. I think that's what I feel like. Me as a Cantonese that grew up in 80s and 90s, it's like, I don't know, do I need to go back 100 years ago to like look for, oh, what's my family's like recipe for this certain thing in order to prove that, oh, I'm from this like certain area in Guangzhou, something like that. Like, it can be your own search, but it should also just be kept to yourself, I think, in the search of it.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it, and there's a part of me that definitely understands that that impotence. Since I'm, somebody, some American who like I didn't really think about even the heritage of, because you're just an American, you don't really think about it. That wasn't even the case not that long ago, and I'm doing a history podcast called Americana Obscura, where I will grab lesser known aspects of American history and try to shed a little light on them. And I do feel a little bit of that. I guess I can understand and empathize with it because I think it's probably something that goes in cycles when it comes to like identity and self-perception. Like it's easy to just go with the flow sometimes. Sometimes you want to know, like, oh, what was it like, 100, 200 years ago,
Mhm. Yeah. And I guess speaking of, American food. Oh, what's the book? Give me a second. Man, I have a terrible memory. Oh yeah, Food of a Younger Land. Have you ever the
No.
Kurlansky book? Oh, it's fascinating. It was so during the Great Depression, there was a project called American Eats. It was a make work project for writers. And so they're basically tasked with going around the United States and writing about the local food traditions and recipes, at that time in the US. It was called America Eats. And it was never published, but the kind of a collection of the essays and stuff, they were in the Library of Congress. And Kurlansky, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He, obviously a food writer. He went and kind of organized some of these essays and released them, right? And so it's called Food of the Younger Land, I believe. I can double check. But what's so interesting about it is that there were certain practices that people in the 1930s would engage in that is almost resonant with certain kinds of Chinese techniques. So to give two examples, one of them, it can be like a slight controversial thing on the food internet about whether you should wash your rice before you
Mhm.
cook it, right? And in the South Carolina chapter, they're going over a couple of their rice dishes, and one of them is just like, oh, and be sure that you thoroughly wash your rice before you actually use it. And I'm just like, thank you. Yeah, so we knew how to do this, but it was kind of lost, right? Or another one where lots of times the sort of off flavors from certain game, that kind of thing. I've heard some people these days saying like, oh, why do you need Shaoxing wine or all of these things in order to kind of contradict gamey flavors? Like maybe I want to enjoy the gamey flavors, and that's fine, right? But then, yeah, it was like in the Vermont chapter, I believe, where they were talking about, how they would be handling certain game meat, and it was, one of the big things was, treating it with wine, right? In
Mhm.
order to kind of remove those odors. And it's just like, so that's an interesting kind of thing where when you're going back, you can actually really see some of the similarities to certain techniques that people might think of in 2026 as a Chinese technique, but historically we also had as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably like a really great flattening of American food culture, probably like in that post-war period for a little while. Just kind of from what I've read, and I think there's a lot of like rediscovering of some of those food traditions. And again, people like Anthony Bourdain, I think, would get into that, and
Mhm.
it's something that I find interesting, and maybe like to dig into it a little bit more at some point. But I guess a couple other kind of related questions I have for you guys. Like the first is like, what are some like misconceptions about Chinese food or technique that you think a lot of people in the West have, or maybe even big hurdles, I guess, that people seem resistant to? Since, just for example, like for me, it was a little some of the stuff like fermented bean curd and stuff like that. There's not really a great analog to that in the West, but once you
Oh,
get used to it,
cheese.
it's like, yeah, I suppose that's true. But like the bean, yeah, I suppose that's a good point. And maybe that was the bridge for me. And like once I get used to it, it's fine. It's maybe a little bit different, but not totally off base. But like for me, like for whatever reason, like cooked lettuce, I can't do. Like spinach, whatever it is, but like even if like it's like an Italian sub and like the lettuce is too warm, like I just
Yeah,
can't.
like you
Whatever
can't
reason.
put lettuce on a Quiznos kind of thing.
Yeah, it's weird, you
Yeah.
know.
Meat with bones in.
Oh yeah.
That's a big
Mhm.
thing. It's so sometimes like we don't do a lot of fish recipes because they never do well. Like people just seems to be too afraid to cook fish, which is kind of frustrating because there are like lots of great fish cooking techniques
Yeah.
and stuff. Like what else? Oh, like where we live right now, eel is a big thing. I love eating it, but like we cannot do
Well,
it.
yeah, people can't probably find eel very
Yeah.
easily. I mean, maybe from a Japanese or Asian. I'm
No,
not sure.
those
Yeah.
are prepped.
Yeah.
You don't get the fresh ones.
Yeah, that's true, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess there's certain dishes that then also like the eel blood, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say definitely when it comes
Also
to
using blood.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I
Which
mean,
is
you
weird
see
because
blood
that's an
sausage.
older European thing until fairly recently. Like even like Germany and Poland, and because I grew up in Milwaukee, and like that German cooking, like that wasn't totally unheard of, like blood sausage stuff, like the German food. So
Yeah, I would say that probably the big one is when it comes to, let's just say, like food in mainland China, um, is eating things that are around bones. Have you ever, when you like gone to a Sichuan restaurant or something and actually gotten like a poultry dish where there are little pieces of meat with the bone still in?
yeah,
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I, meet a lot of people that, they'll come to China, whether for work or travel. And that's one of the things that I would say Chinese poultry dishes are often very difficult for people because ultimately for eating around the bone, we still have an idea for a video, maybe actually instructing people how to do it. It's a chopstick problem, right? Because if you got a little bony piece of meat, if I had told you to use your fingers, you would be like, yeah, sure, right? Like kind of gnaw around it, it's fine. But then lots of times I feel like people conceptualize chopstick as a fork replacement instead of a finger extender, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so like lots of times people will see this and they don't know how to handle it, right? And it takes a little bit to get used to, I would say, right? So doing those kinds of things, yeah, and for some reason, I don't know why, just in general, right? Like all throughout food YouTube, it's like anything, unless you're making sushi, right? Anything with a fish is just guaranteed to be like 0 views. Yeah. People don't
Yeah.
like fish.
The American palate doesn't seem to love it unless it's fried. Well, again, although I think that's maybe regional too, because when you were saying that, it made me think of it's not really a problem for me. I guess not. We didn't do it with chopsticks, but I grew up eating like smothered pork neck bones, so that wasn't really totally outside of the realm of what's possible.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing will be organs like
Hmm.
brain, lungs, heart, intestine, even knuckle. It's like any meat, any protein that's not the loins or a steak, it's kind of hard. I understand like people probably never grew up with it. It just seems scary. Maybe they don't know how to prep it, or maybe they supermarkets don't even have it. So it's something that's very intimidating. Like even if you're interested in food, those may be ingredients that can be intimidating for you to just like bring home, and what do I do with it? Like you
Yeah.
have
Also
no
takes some
idea.
prep, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It takes prep and time, but I just hope that people can just have that would just be less intimidated by it, because the preps are actually not that bad. Like my mom loved to use pork pig lung for soups. Um for me, even when I was a kid, I just help her prep the lung all the time. It's not that hard. It takes you like 20 minutes or 15 to just like keep on swapping the water in it, and like that's
Hmm.
it, right? So I feel like I hope people can be less intimidated by all those quote unquote weird cuts or organs, because they have very good taste and texture, and it opens up a lot of possibilities for a lot of traditional cooking throughout the
Hmm.
world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be a big thing for me.
Well, of course, Americans love that type of meat, but we just love it in the form of hot dogs. You got to grind it up and put
Yeah,
it in a
you
juice
just grind
press,
it
and
up,
then yeah.
make a
But no,
slushy, and
yeah, that's
I mean, I like hot dogs. I mean, yeah.
yeah. It's I guess, and again, like I didn't have it too much more like the super side of my family would have something like chitlins, which is like a deep fried intestines. It was never my favorite, but it's something that it's not totally alien, which is part of what I love talking about food culture, because I love talking about culture and history and how everything intersects, and especially at a time where like there's a lot of animosity in the world. Like, okay, maybe this is a good conversation opener. Um, so to that end, as we're getting close to the end of the time, like what's something about like Chinese culture that you wish people in the West understood better, and like maybe some misconceptions?
Hmm. That's a very broad topic. I feel like Chinese people ourselves have a lot
Hmm.
of misconception about our own culture as well. It's
Hmm.
sometimes it just depends on how you view this broad topic as culture. Um Here, you as the Westerner, what do you think?
Um, I often kind of feel like one thing that kind of often gets lost when people talk about China in the West is like it's one word, it's one concept, it's one thing, China, right? And so it's very easy for somebody to go on a business trip to Shanghai, talk to some people and say, Chinese people are this, or China is like that. But it's I mean, it's a little bit cliche, but it's like, it's a big place with different people that think differently. And like, probably we all know that, but it feels like often we forget it, that there's a lot of, that there are Chinese liberals and then there's Chinese nationalists, that there are, places in China where that are completely cashless and everybody is, well, not everybody, but a lot of the road is on electric vehicles. And then there's places where, you're having street markets with live animals and people are, haggling for them. And like both of those things just exist simultaneously. And so I think that it's good that post-pandemic, a lot of people are traveling to China again, that, there's more people, like it's less, I guess, intense, some of the surrounding politics, and people are coming to China and seeing the reality, and that's great. But lots of times you end up seeing people that, they may go to China because they think that they want, to see a modern, futuristic, cyberpunk place, and then they go to Shanghai and maybe Chongqing, and then they don't go elsewhere, and that's fine. Like, you can just go where you want to travel, right? It's not a problem. But then it's sometimes you would get certain kinds of, I guess, journalistic types that end up kind of presenting a very narrow slice of the society as what is happening in China or what Chinese people think, but it's like a sixth of humanity. Like, it's very difficult to generalize like that.
Oh, I guess on that note, I feel like I wouldn't call it maybe like misconception, but it's sometimes a general vibe that I still feel. It's that um Chinese culture or China as a place, it's just as real as wherever you are and whoever you are. I feel like I hope that it will be less othering of the concept of China in general. It's just like view it as normal as any human being in place it can be. Like he said earlier, like Chris just said, like there's Chinese liberals, there's Chinese nationalists, but then in between those the two ends of the spectrum is just like normal everyday Chinese people. And another thing is that yes, it's very vast, big, it's a very deep culture. um don't view it as like scary or anything, but it's just as maybe an interesting spot in the world that's really big and deep to just explore and feel and have fun. Have fun. That's
Yeah.
what I'll say.
It's definitely on my list of places I'd really love to visit someday. So pretty much, like I said, ever since I was a kid, I've been kind of fascinated with Chinese art and like history, because that just reading random books. But kind of the same thing. Like in the U.S., like it's either demonized or totally idealized. I remember reading.
Yeah, there's nothing in the middle. It's always,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and kind of like you said, it's easy to see people as a monolith. As I'm sure to some degree, people in China will see the United States as a monolith, and then that's kind of at least part of the reason I do stuff like this. I just talked to somebody from Israel recently too, for the same reason. It's like there's liberals there, there's conservatives there. Not everybody agrees with what's going on, but what really made me think of it is like I was reading about like the Chinese lying flat movement. It's like, oh wow, young people feel like they're screwed over everywhere in the world. So there's a lot more similarities there than I think people are maybe willing to always give credit for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially like where we're living in Yunnan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we kind of joke there's a specific city, Dali, which is sort of like probably the Tanping capital, where it's like, you get basically, either a lot of people from Shanghai, maybe they're young, they're doing a digital nomad kind of thing, or maybe, there's like an early retirement kind of thing, or maybe they're just taking some time off, and then they go and spend time in Dali and do that kind of thing, right?
Well, Dali has priced out the actual lying flat crowd. Now there are lots of traders there.
Yeah.
There's Traders Club.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like stock trading.
Stock, finance, futures.
Yep. Sounds like a lot of
Bitcoins.
second tier cities in the United States that were cheap a decade ago that are now unaffordable.
Yeah, so there's like this kind of like global trends that you can see in both US, China, Asia, Europe. All of these things are happening at the same time. It's like against this big drop of modernity, like China's no exception. It's just everything is also happening here. It's like if you don't live here or if you don't pay attention to this kind of movements or changes, you might not know. But it's just as as everything else in the world's going on, it's also going on here.
Yeah. Well, there's less homelessness here.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So ups
Yeah.
and downs
Well,
of any
anyway, yeah,
society, I
all
suppose.
countries have
Yeah.
their
Mhm.
problems, and
Yeah.
yeah. The I guess the other thing that I would say there. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was going to say I know we're coming close to the end of our time. So if you guys have any closing thoughts before we get into plugs and promotions, and I always do a last little sign off question. So any closing thoughts or anything to add to that?
Well, I'll say it's still like with what I just said, it's against this backdrop of modernity. That China is still a very good place to explore things with a lot of diversity, even though that things are rapidly urbanizing, modernizing. There are many spots that you can experience a little bit of that, like older lifestyle or experience some kind of different way of living, seeing how people may still have certain kinds of like, I'll say pre-modern uh, way of life in pockets in the country. Sometimes you need to go deeper, but there's still possibilities and chances that you can see the nuance and fun of our world.
Yeah. I think
Food's great too.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's also one of the things. Like, um, we were talking a little bit earlier about, America Eats and kind of how there was sort of a lot of flattening, in the post-war period in the United States with the development of the interstate highway system, just kind of changes and kind of economy and work and that kind of thing. I would say that like right now, China's still a very rapidly changing place. In some ways, you could view it as not necessarily, I don't want to say like the same place in the development curve, but like a certain kind of inflection point that's almost similar to the 50s and 60s, in the United States, where, right now, you can come to China, you can go a little deeper, you can go a little smaller cities, you can go into the countryside, and there's a lot of uh, diversity when it comes to food and dialects and all of these kinds of things. Is that going to be the same when we're old? When we are 70, like 80? Probably not, right? Like, that you just iterate the function a couple generations later, and it's going to be a different looking country. Probably some benefits and also some detriments. But I would, I guess, implore people if they're interested in China, if they're interested in seeing kind of like all of these little pockets, come now. Like, just, you know, in the US, it's a little bit, it's not totally visa free, but it's definitely an easy thing to kind of take 10 days and include it into an Asia trip. And, one of just come and see it for yourself, explore some of the food yourself. I think it's a really good place to travel. Your apps don't work. You need to kind of do a little bit of planning, but yeah, I would just recommend people come to China, see for
Well,
themselves.
when I eventually make my trip, I'll be sure to message you guys so you guys can give me the itinerary of where to go and where to try.
For sure.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess so, since we're coming to the end of the time, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation. But do you have any plugs and promotions, anything you want to tell the audience about to check out?
Anything in particular? I would say,
Well, we are starting to post, speaking of traveling to China, we are starting to
Mhm.
post city guides of like places that we've lived or been to, either multiple times or maybe even just once. We are starting to share our food recommendations for many different places in China. also
Yeah, so that's on Substack, Chinese Cooking Demystified Substack. So far we've covered Shenzhen, and then Bangkok, where we did live for 3 years, and
it's coming up.
Shunda are also in the works. So we're going through that slog of finding and writing about all of the restaurants that we've enjoyed. So you can find that on the Chinese Cooking Demystified Substack here on Substack. And of course, the YouTube channel, Chinese Cooking Demystified, the Substack, subscribe, get your friends to all
Also,
subscribe. Yeah.
I've been doing it slightly less now, but I also like posting travel pictures and videos on Instagram. So it's also where a place you can see that we are like what we're actually eating, maybe of the day or maybe of that week. Then you can see it for yourself that, oh, this is an interesting dish that I never would have thought of that they would make it this way.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I think we'll have the audience check all of that out. So I guess I just have one final question for you guys, and this is kind of the sign-off questions I always ask all my guests, since the world is a little crazy and doom and gloom right now. So I'll say, what's something that makes you feel hopeful for the future?
Hopeful for the future.
Or something that would, if you don't have any time.
Give me a second to think. And
for me, as a Chinese that's living in China, but because we have a very close tie to the US, for me, to actually our American friends and American audience, I'll say it's actually it's how to say, let me put it this way. The cultural diversity of America. America is a very interesting place where you have so many different ethnicities and communities and culture that's living in one place and all trying to make it work. And I know it's kind of chaotic right now. There's many different voices, but I do think America is one of the places that's doing it actually the best of multiculturalism. I know it's chaotic now, but I'm sure you guys can make it work. I don't know.
Well, thanks for the pep talk. I
really appreciate the
appreciate it.
multiculturalism, all the communities living together. There may be different voices, there may be some conflicts, maybe there some people dislike each other. Of course, it happens. You don't like your neighbors. You may not like what your neighbors are putting in front of their door, but you're living together. You're trying to make it work.
That's true.
And so that's I honestly, like, weirdly, I'm a very kind of optimistic, hopeful person in general. I'm generally not like a doom and gloomer. But when you're pressing me for like something specific, I'm like, I can't really think of anything specifically off the top of my head. I'm looking forward to the high-speed train opening in between Kunming and Chongqing. That'll cut travel time.
Who doesn't love trains?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's the best I got for you off the top of my head. I'm sorry that I don't have anything. Yeah.
no,
Generally,
well, I think those are both good options. I think I'll just say once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having
yeah,
us.
thanks for having us.
You guys have a good time.
You too.
Thank you.